Hey guys, welcome back to another episode here in the Transformation Lab. My name is Tracy Underhill and I am your host. This is the third episode in the series Journey to Now, where my plan was to share with you my story and the 3 life-changing ideas and the processes that helped me transform my life to my journey to now. And my hope is that in sharing these ideas, these processes, that there's something of value for you that you can use now and start applying it to your own life. Now, in episode 2, we started to talk about one of these 3 life-changing ideas or concepts, focus. And I shared with you what we focus our attention on is what we create or what we will create in our lives. And I want to take this a little bit deeper now. Our thoughts trigger emotions, and these emotions, have a vibrational frequency to these. And the vibrational frequency of these emotions then send feedback into our original thoughts. So we have a thought, the thoughts create an emotion, the emotion creates a behavior or a movement in the body, and then that behavior or that movement in the body then reinforces the thoughts we had in the first place. So what happens is we then continue to give this mental attention to the initial thought, right? Which reaffirms this emotion in the first place, which then energizes the thought. And so we experience this continuous cycle of think, feel, think, feel, think, feel. This results in this emotional state that you come to experience, right? With stress and feeling depressed, discouraged, happy, energized, confidence. So when you have a thought, and think about that for a second, you have a thought, you think about something, and then that thought triggers an emotion. That emotion triggers, a certain behavior, and the behavior then triggers or reinforces the thought that you had in the first place. So for me, right, I believed that I wasn't good enough. And because I believed it wasn't good enough, this created this emotion in my body. And this emotion caused me to act or have a certain behavior, and then that behavior and the response from that behavior then reinforced the thought. So let's go back to the example I gave in the first episode of, I got this phone call from Gerber Baby, and they wanted to, they were trying to get me to pay into this, like a savings program, educational savings program for my boys. Now my boys were both still in diapers at the time, and Gerber Baby, they do an education savings plan, was my thought. So I believed, and what my thought was and what I was focusing on is that they were just trying to scam me. So what happened is I ended up telling them off, and I told them off, hung the phone up, and that whole sensation of telling them off and then hanging up the phone then reinforced my thoughts in the first place, because then I just believed it reinforced the belief that they were just trying to scam me, which was my thought initially. What I was focusing on is that everybody was out to get me. And I mean, eventually down the road, I had no savings for my boys' education, and it was legit. So the results of our thoughts and what we focus on results in this emotional state that you come to experience where you're stressed, you're depressed, or happy or energized, whichever. So let's look at it from a positive perspective. I have this thought that, and what I'm focusing on is maybe going out for a walk and going into nature. So I go out into a walk, I go into nature, and then it creates this emotion in me where I feel at peace. And then that feeling of at peace creates this little bit of smile where the edges of my mouth turn up a little bit. And that smile then reinforces the thoughts that I had in the first place, because now not only am I feeling good, but I'm feeling my body feel good. So how you think and how you feel directly impact how your body reacts, and all three of these things influence how we behave and what actions we take. So this is how our thoughts create our reality. It's in the way that we behave and act that defines who you are and what you experience in your life. And the way that you behave and act is simply this construction on how you think, feel, and do. So in short, emotions are the reactions to the thoughts that you give attention to. How you feel and how, your body language, this is a reflection of what you're thinking about. And since your emotions and your body's reactions are triggered by your thoughts that you give attention to, therefore you're living in a world of thought. Your thoughts create your experience. Therefore, your experience and what you experience is what you experience that you think. I know, you'll have to listen to that again. But your thoughts create your experiences, and therefore, how you experience things, you're experiencing it through how you think. So this means that all the problems that we experience are nothing more than thinking problems, right? The real problem is not the problem. The real problem is how we think about our problems. We are not our circumstances. We are what we think our circumstances are. So for me, what I was thinking and what we think about ends up being our circumstances. And I was coming from this place of fear. I was coming from this place that everybody was out to get me, because that was the thought process I had at the time. And this is how I experienced all the circumstances in my life. If we go back to the example of Gerber, instead of me seeing this as a beautiful opportunity to put money aside for my boys, I saw it as this whole scam. When you stop and you think about what are some of the words that you use to describe yourself? How do you see yourself? What do you believe about yourself? Are your thoughts positive or negative? And then stop and take a look. What are these thoughts creating in your world and in your surroundings? It's interesting too, because, we were talking about fear and how fear is false evidence appearing real. We have this thing called an ego, and our ego is there to keep us protected. But the problem is that our ego keeps us in this fight or flight, and our ego thinks from this place of fear and judgment, right? In order to protect us, it's always got this negative stuff, you better be cautious. What if they're out to scam you? Instead of seeing it from a place of love and light, where what a great opportunity for you to put a little bit of money aside for your boys, for their education. So we could see it from one of two ways, but ego keeps us stuck in fear and judgment. And the ego is something that we've actually created, for this fight or flight, and it simply as a way of protecting ourselves and our interpretation of the world. Ego does have a purpose, but unfortunately, sometimes that purpose of our ego keeps us too stuck, and then we don't change things. It's in our fears that lies our greatest opportunities to grow. So in the things that we're afraid of and the judgments that we have, when we stop and we think about what are the words that we use to describe ourselves, how do I see myself? And what is it that you believe about yourself? Are your thoughts positive or negative? So if we take a moment and we look at what our fears are or our judgments are, here is where our greatest growth lies, is within those fears and judgment, what we focus on. And if we can stop and realize what our fears are and what we're focusing on with those fears and that judgment, here's where your growth is. That's where you can shift and start seeing things from a different perspective. Join me in the next episode on focus, where we actually talk more about perception and how perception is projection. And this will be the last episode on this series on focus in this series of Journey to Now. Thank you all so much for listening and for sharing this space with me today. There is, like I said, so much information that I want to share with you and to unpack around these 3 mindset topics of focus, belief, and action. How important these were in building the foundation of change that impacted my life and why. I want to break these down and continue to break these down into more digestible pieces so that you can start to integrate these into your own life. We're going to continue on this series, and we're going to dive deeper and deeper into these components of focus, and then onto belief and then actions. I'm so excited to be sharing this with you. See you in the next episode here in the Transformation Lab.